Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, How to Write a Philosophy Paper, which we're doing all October long. In this video, we're going to be looking at objecting to an argument. Now, philosophy is advanced by new authors offering strong objections to arguments that were once thought impenetrable, or defenses of arguments once thought to be debunked. Unless you're going to put forward your own argument and position in often a longer paper, this is also the way for you to add your contribution to an ongoing academic discussion, even in quite a short way, of pointing out flaws that exist in current standing arguments. Objecting to an argument is an inherently creative process, so there's no perfect roadmap of how to do it. There are many different ways to object to an argument or to raise your concerns with one. And depending on the specific argument, you're going to have different options that are available to you and different paths that are best to take. So instead of offering a perfect roadmap of the best way to object to an argument, what I'm going to offer here are some general ways that you can approach objecting to an argument. But this is definitely not an exhaustive list. So, broadly, if you're presented with an argument, complete with premises and conclusion, either by the author or through your own interpretations of an author, as per the previous video on summarizing an argument, you have two options of objecting to that argument. Either object to the logic, claim that the premises fail to imply the conclusion, or object to the premises themselves, claim that one of the premises is false or not sufficiently supported to give us reason to believe it. Problems in underlying logic are more objective, though not always easy to find. A good argument usually has a conclusion that validly follows from its premises. But on the off chance that the argument you're looking at doesn't, if you find that flaw in the logic, this is a clear way to say this argument is invalid, and so we shouldn't believe it. But barring that, you may be stuck with objecting to one of the premises. Now, this is a little bit more subjective because you can't point to simple rules of classical logic to say that this is a flawed argument, but it also gives you more creativity and more potential. Even very solid arguments usually have at least some question in the premises that they're presenting. Technically, there is one more way to object to an argument, which is namely showing that the argument is circular. If there is only one real premise that isn't simply a law of logic, and that premise is logically identical to the conclusion, then the argument is circular, and therefore unconvincing, because anyone that accepts the premise accepts the conclusion. You're just really rephrasing the conclusion. Now, this is a specific case that is not going to apply to many arguments, but it's something good to keep in mind if you're faced with an argument where the logic is so rock solid that you realize there's really only one premise here, and that premise is just the same as the conclusion. Now, really the best way to determine what's wrong with an argument is to look at logical fallacies. Check out my Fallacy February for an exhaustive list of a lot of fallacies. These may demonstrate mistakes in logic between premises or the support for the premises themselves. Many objections take some form of these fallacies, even if they don't state it explicitly. You may be saying that there's an equivocation between two terms that are being used in two premises in different ways. You might say there's a false dilemma being presented where the author claims that these are the only two options, but actually there's a third way, and so on. They may not say that explicitly, or you may not say that explicitly when you're presenting an objection, but often some version of these fallacies is what's at play when you're looking at an argument that seems convincing on its face, but is actually problematic. When objecting, you can also take a more direct approach using a particular style of objection. We're going to look at two here: Reductio ad absurdum and no salient difference. So Reductio ad absurdum basically shows that the consequences of a particular premise or assumption are problematic or absurd. The most convincing version of this is to show that a premise or set of premises included in the argument actually imply a logical contradiction, making them impossible. If you can come up with something that does that, you have a really strong case against an argument. Because if holding the premises implies a contradiction, by the rules of logic, from a contradiction anything follows. And so They could have come up with any conclusion in the place of their conclusion. So if you have a contradiction in your premises, this is a great way to show that the argument's just flat out wrong. However, you might also show that the premises imply something which, while not contradictory, is very counterintuitive. This isn't necessarily going to show that, wow, we have to completely throw this argument out, but it's going to require the author to, quote unquote, bite the bullet, or accept a very counterintuitive conclusion if they want to continue to hold their argument. Another method, particularly used when dealing with thought experiments, is to argue that there's no salient difference between one case that points our intuition in one direction and another case which points our intuition in a different direction. Basically, what this is saying is that the idea of the thought experiment is flawed because it's using various psychological tweaks to make you think that something is intuitive, when if you were to put it in a situation that had no salient or important difference, you would have a different intuition. A common example might be the comparison of the trolley problem. Should you redirect a trolley going towards 5 people to going towards 1, therefore killing 1 to save 5, to a doctor deciding if they should kill a healthy patient to use their organs to save 5 others. If your theory cannot account for our different intuitions in the two cases, then your theory or argument has an issue. And that would be something along the lines of no salient difference, of saying that the case that you provide has no salient or important difference, in this case in an ethical sense, from some other case. So if your theory can't account for our difference in intuition, your theory has a problem. The tools from these first videos are probably all you need for a basic, short philosophy paper. Provide an introduction, define your terms, summarize the argument, and then offer one or more objections to that argument. The second half of this series will look at more complicated papers that summarize more than one argument, or offer more than just a single objection to a single argument, or provide responses to your own objections and objections to those responses, and so on and so forth. So, stay tuned in the rest of this series if you want some more of those tips. They are quite useful. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at a different topic within this subset of reinterpreting a historical argument. It's going to be particularly useful for anyone that's looking to write a history of philosophy paper. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.